My name is Justin Jarvis. I'm a lecturer at the University of Arizona. I teach principles courses, both big and small, and I'd like to share with you an innovation I created to help students understand what the free market is. The free market is so ubiquitous in our everyday interactions and in those of our students that we sort of assume that the students understand the allocative mechanism of the marketplace, when in reality, there is a lack of understanding on all the intricacies and the steps and the complexities that occur in quantity determination, price determination, who makes the product, who sells the product, all of these assumptions that we require and definitions, that we require for an efficient market allocation are sometimes glossed over just because we assume that the market's going to do that. So what I've done is I've offered the students the ability to participate in a simulation inside the classroom in which we throw the typical free market allocative mechanism out and we adopt what's called a participatory economics or participatory economy. So I borrowed participatory economy from Robin Hahnel and Michael Albert, their book, The Political Economy of Participatory Economics. And basically, the idea here is that it's a third alternative to market allocation. Our usual two alternatives are the free market and essentially planned economy. And we kind of ignore any other alternative. So that in this third alternative, workers and consumers workers are the consumers, they collectively decide how much they want to produce, and then they decide how much they want to consume. And in the case of a supply and demand mismatch, a centralized iteration facilitation board, or IFB, kind of changes what the relative prices, the terms of trade between labor and these goods. And these consumption goods, for every consumption good in the entire economy. This is the way theoretically the participatory economy would work. And then once the terms of trade or the relative prices are changed, then the citizens are allowed to decide how much they want to produce and how much they want to consume, and they continue doing this and adjusting the terms of trade until there's a supply and demand match, and then production and consumption begins for the economy. So in this very simplified simulation, what I allow my students to do is they get to decide production between two goods, pizza and beer. They come up to the front of the classroom. I have set out a worker federation for pizza company and the beer company. Students get to decide which worker federation they want to join, and then collectively they decide how much of each good to produce. Now, the only materials required is I hand out a playing card randomly to each individual with the numbers 2 through 10. I discard the face cards. That gives them their labor endowment. So there's a little bit of heterogeneity there in terms of the labor endowment. And I give them a sheet of instructions each it kind of details all their steps that they'll have to go through. The steps are fairly simple. I'll run through them. So they take their labor endowment collectively with their worker federation. Everybody decides with their labor endowment how many pizzas or beers that they can make in the worker federation. Then they go sit down, and with the people around them in the classroom, they become their neighborhood consumption councils, and they decide how much they want to consume collectively. And then there's a volunteer who plays the role of the iteration facilitation board, or IFB, who sums up using Google Docs and taking notes, sums up how much of each good wants to be both supplied and demanded. There's never, especially the first time around, the first iteration, there's never a supply and demand match. So the IFB then decrements the terms of trade by 5. So 1 labor hour trades for so much pizza and or beer. They decrement it and allow the iteration to happen again. So then individuals redecide how much they want to consume. In my simulation, you could have them go back to their worker federation, decide how much they want to produce, and then iterate again how much they want to consume to see if we get a match. To shorten the time, I just allow them to redecide how much they want to consume. I keep as fixed how much they had already originally decided to produce. Okay, and then once they decide how much they want to consume, then the IFB volunteer again sees if there's a supply and demand match. Usually this takes 4 times or so, 4 or so iterations until there's a supply and demand match. The IFB volunteer decrements the terms of trade between labor and the consumption good every time. And then eventually they get to the point where the production that they want, the production that they chose is also the amount of the consumption that they chose. And at that point, the simulation ends. So the materials are not overwhelming. There's the aforementioned deck of cards and the instruction sheet for each individual. And the procedure is rather easy to implement once the instructor understands what a participatory economy is. It's very different from the regular free market allocative mechanism, which is one of the reasons why I think it would be a very interesting presentation at the conference. I could kind of explain this to individuals. Now, the value of this simulation, I think, lies in 2 pieces. And the first is a deeper understanding of all of the intricacies and the complexities of the free market's rationing mechanisms. Students firsthand understand just how difficult it is to decide how much needs to be made, how much needs to be consumed, who makes what, who purchases what, and when they're confronted with having to make these decisions themselves in a democratic collaborative system group with their classmates, they see how very, very difficult it is to accomplish outside of the free market. And so it allows them to see all of these pieces that are required when we talk about the efficient outcome of the market. Otherwise, I think most of my students don't really understand what it means to have an efficient allocation of resources. And then the second piece of value is the fact it gives them a deeper understanding for the rationing mechanism of the free market. Now, we live in a society where I think it's no secret a lot of people are unhappy with the current rationing mechanism of the free market and or the allocations that people have ended up with, right? Don't forget that there's been a lot of we are the 99% and Occupy Wall Street kind of manifestations, and students understand kind of innately that there is some difficulty and tension in the way the free market allocates goods. Instead of, however, just complaining about that or saying that it's broken, right, I push them to imagine an alternative, this participatory economy, and they immediately see just how difficult it is to allocate resources in an alternative manner, and it gives them a lot of understanding and appreciation of how the free market allocates resources. You see, it's definitely a foundational principle of pedagogy that understanding the opposite of what you want the student to learn is very, very beneficial in their learning process. So those are the 2 main pieces of value why I think it's important. Both they understand all of the pieces of the free market by learning about the opposite or an alternative to the free market, a strategy that doesn't rely on the free market's decentralized allocation mechanism. So they learn about the intricacies of the free market, and they also have an appreciation for it because they see how difficult an alternative is. So thank you very much for considering my submission. I hope to see you at the conference. Take care.